Hello and welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Remembrancers Library Podcast. My name is Vincent, as always, and this will be the second last episode without Ethan. He should be back after I'm finished up with this segment about the Eldar. And today I'm going to start off with a quick apology for missing last week's episode with no notice. We had some technical difficulties right at the last minute, and we all were too busy to get things back on track in time for our usual posting. So we're just going to pick up this week right where we left off, re-recording the episode that should have gone up last week. And yeah, sorry for that, and thank you for sticking with us through it. Now, before I'll get right into the episode today, I'll get our usual house cleaning out of the way. If you're on the YouTube, thank you so much for watching us here. If you like the video, this episode, please feel free to drop us a like. If you have any comments or questions or anything like that, feel free to drop them in the comments section below. We do love hearing from you guys. Helps us know if there's anything we're missing or if there's anything in particular that you want to hear more about. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. We love having all you guys here, and that really helps our channel grow and helps us be shown to more people as well. Barring any unforeseen circumstances, we do post regularly every Tuesday. Now, if you're forgetful like me, then it might be handy to turn on the notification bell as well, but I will leave that up to you. If you are listening on the Spotify, thank you so much for joining us over there. Feel free to drop a like if you liked the episode, as well as give us a download. That really does help us out. And of course, no matter where you're at, please feel free to share us around if you know anybody that might enjoy what we're talking about here. And we do love having the community grow. And so, yeah, that would be much appreciated. But with that, I will jump right into the episode here. So today I will be talking about one of the two main subgroups of the current Eldar in Warhammer history, timeline, whatever you want to call it, the Asuryani, also known as the Craftworld Eldar, sometimes also called the Children of Isha. These are I won't say good guys, but they are the less bad, or the least bad, in my humble opinion, and I'm sure there's other people out there who agree with me, but as we know, there are no good guys in Warhammer, but in my opinion, these guys are pretty chill. They do still do terrible things, but they're more chill about it. Anyways, they were able to escape the birth of Slaanesh because they were on their Craftworlds, which is why they are called Craftworld Eldar. I'll get more into that in a second, but first I will touch on their name. So the Asuryani, the name comes from their god Asuryan. They try to sort of follow in their way of life is based on what would Asuryan do to avoid the temptation of Slaanesh. Now, they don't worship Asuryan in a typical religious way anymore because he is in fact dead. Slaanesh killed him when they were born, and so they continue to revere they continue to revere their dead gods, but they don't worship them actively. But these guys at least try to follow in Asuryan's morals and values and all that good stuff to sort of keep them away from Slaanesh. So yeah, like I said, they were able to escape on the Craftworlds from the initial psychic sonic boom that went off, and they did so fairly last minute. Some Craftworlds did not make it because they had returned to the homeworlds to try and, well, some did successfully. They made it to the homeworld, and they took the few remaining sane Eldari from the home planets, pulled them onto the Craftsworlds, and hit pedal to the metal to get away as fast as they could. Some were not so lucky. But the ships that they'd been on, the Craftworlds, at this point, they weren't technically Craftworlds, they were just large ships. Now, the Eldari, in the prime of their empire, the Eldari did not have faster than light speed travel for their ships. And they didn't really need it because they lived so long. But in order to ensure that the ships would remain, well, they did have them engineered to be pretty well self-sufficient, but they made them large enough that hundreds of families could fit into a ship so that, they had people if they needed. And also there were some planets that smaller groups of these Eldari would go and then colonize and live on, different from the Exodites, because they did so just because they felt like it, not because they were trying to leave. They were trying to make bigger, larger the Eldari Empire. These were huge self-sufficient ships, and these ships would occasionally return to the Eldari homeworlds. Now, it was usually maybe only a handful of times every 1,000 years or so. Because of this, they could see the decline of the homeworld Eldari a lot better than the homeworld Eldari could, because to them the decline was quite slow, and they didn't realize that things were so bad because they were in the middle of it all of the time. But when the Craftworld Eldar came home, they were able to see just how much of a change had happened in the last couple hundred years. So yeah, as things started to get worse and worse, the Craftworld Eldari started kind of collecting the last few sane Eldar, or Eldari still, and getting them off the home planet. And then by the time that Slaanesh had enough of the psyche, the offshoots of the psyche of the Eldari to manifest, once the craft worlds sort of got out of dodge and then were starting to reestablish themselves, each of the craft worlds they all evolved considerably since or past, sorry, the ships that they once were, that were still relatively large, but now most of them are quite large, about the size of a small, or about the size of a whole continent or a small asteroid, depending on how you want to look at that. And they did develop differently because they were different groups of people, but they all ended up housing infinity circuits because I don't know how exactly it collectively worked, but they realized that their souls were falling to Slaanesh when they died at this point in time. They figured out the infinity circuits. I think I have more notes on that in the Drakari episode. But either way, they have each craft world is powered by an infinity circuit, and that is the basis of their power grid. And they were all grown, if that's the word I'm going to use, with wraithbone, because they were all constructed out of wraithbone, and then the Bonesingers just continued to add on and add on. And like I said, even before, these ships are entirely self-sufficient. They have gardens and forests inside of these ships, so they've got the ecosphere going and all that jazz. So they are completely, they don't ever need to land on a planet to restock. They've got everything that they need. And like I said, they each developed uniquely, and they all ended up having different cultures, but they all had the same motive of not falling to Slaanesh and not letting the species, or not letting the race follow the path that they're trying to get better. Some of the Craftsworlds ended up going more formal in their ruling structure, where they've got like the hierarchy, a monarchy, a ruling family, or whatever, and others went more tribal. Now the chain of command on any of these is still usually topped by whoever the most powerful fighter and who the most powerful psyker would be. That's kind of it. There still is that sort of ranking of power. There always will be. And the highest ranking warriors, which I'll do a whole thing on in a second here, were called Autarchs. Autarchs? Yeah, I didn't actually say that word out loud before I started recording, so that's just how it's going to be said by me for the rest of the episode. Anyways, so currently there are in the 41st millennium, there are still quite a few crafts worlds that are bouncing around in the galaxy, but there are 5 that are the most well-known and most mentioned, and I believe these are the main playable options on the tabletop as well. So there is Ulthwé, the full name being, and the spelling sometimes differs, but Ulthanish Shelowit. This one is caught in the pull of the Eye of Terror currently. It's being pulled toward the Eye of Terror. It was kind of far enough out, but now is sort of on the verge of danger there. They have more warlocks, more psychically able, people strong with psychic ability. They've got more magic dudes on this craft world than warriors. Their battalion or their like war front are called the Black Guardians. Their armor is black and bone colored, and a character that I've mentioned before, Eldrad Ulthran, he is from Ulthwé. The names sort of all kind of play together there. And it was on the unique thing about Ulthwé is that they produce Dreamstones, and these are made in sort of the same way as the Spirit Stones. These ones are meant to protect the Eldar while they're sleeping, and any Wayfinders or Navigators, which I'll get into in a moment, they'll usually have Dreamstones to protect them from nightmares after being exposed to the warp too much. And yes, it's not wow words. This sort of this craft world is sort of a what came first, the chicken or the egg situation, where it's debated heavily whether because they had more warlocks they were getting pulled into the Eye of Terror stronger, or if because they were in the Eye of Terror they've got more warlocks. There's sort of a debate going there over the whole back and forth, but either way, there's some interesting stuff going on with those guys. There is also Saim-Hann, which is these guys are on quest for enlightenment, like total enlightenment. Their paths, and I'll get into paths in a second, are sort of looser. These guys are more wild overall. This is a feudal ruling system, much the same as Leman Russ's homeworld was. These guys have closer ties to the Exodites because they are sort of more wild still. And there is, like I said, they had a feudal ruling system, and there was sort of one family that was in charge or from this place, however you want to look at that. And these were the Wild Riders. These guys, their battle strategy was like small, fast ships. Their main armor colors would be red and black, and they would often adorn their ships and sometimes their armor with stripes of the red and black. There was also Iyanden, which was once the largest of the craft worlds, but is now the smallest. This craft world was attacked by Hive Fleet Kraken, and they lost thousands of Eldar in that battle. Now, the craft world is mostly inhabited by ghost warriors, the wraith constructs. So these are sort of what's the word I want? Mechs that are piloted by a soul stone. So once an Eldar dies and the soul goes into the spirit stone or the soul stone, that stone can then be put into the mech, and then they can still fight and perform tasks as a robot. So this craft world is majoritively populated by these quote-unquote ghost warriors. Their colors are yellow and blue, and these guys were the first to find the waystones and figure out the infinity circuits, I do believe, and then they have sort of a closer alliance with one of the other craft worlds, which is called Biel-Tan, because they're trying to bring the Eldar race back to their former glory, though they're both doing it sort of for slightly, I can't remember if it's slightly different reasons or they're doing it slightly differently. Either way, the next one is Alaitoc. Now, where the other guys were yellow and blue, these ones are blue and yellow. These ones are very, very disciplined, more so than the rest of the craft worlds, and they have the most number of rangers and pathfinders, as well as outcasts, and sort of just they're very exploratory Eldar. And again, all of those are different paths, which I will get into in just a second here. And these guys, They travel around the galaxy. They're sort of, they don't really have, they just kind of go wherever they want, but they are on call to come back and protect the Maiden Worlds and help fight alongside other Craftworlds. These ones do, because they're more disciplined, they have the highest risk of getting lost on their individual paths, but they do very much try not to. They're close with the Corsairs, and with that, because they're sort of in smaller bands, the Imperium was able to capture a few of the Eldar from Alaitoc and were able to torture them for information. So majority of the information in the episode where I talked about the biology and whatnot, that would have come from these rangers that the Imperium captured. This craft world, their main thing is fighting the Necron. They believe that the Necron are the greatest threat, and they still hold the grudge from the War on Heaven. So their main thing is continuing to fight against the Necron. These ones are pretty much impervious to civil discord because they are so much more disciplined. And civil discord, I'll get into. I have some notes on that somewhere else where things sort of start devolving on some of the crafts worlds because there's disagreements. But this one also is where the Ynnari, the most of the Ynnari, no, because of the Ynnari. Sorry, the Ynnari cause the civil unrest, but these guys, because they have such a strong bond with each other that they don't really, none of them really fall sway to the Ynnari. And then the last craft world I'll talk about today is Biel-Tan, which I mentioned before. This one's very much a military craft world, or it's organized similar to, or it's organized to help to be efficient in military ways. Their colors are green and white. These ones have the most aspect warriors, another path which I'll talk about in a second. These ones want to rebuild the empire in their Infinity Circuit. They have sort of a special section that is for their warriors that have fallen honorably in battle. They have a separate section sort of for them that young aspect warriors can go into and get counsel from their ancestors. These ones, they're sort of, like I said, they're very militant. Their tactic, as opposed to the Saim-Hann, which are very they're on the speedsters, they're on the ships and whatnot. Biel-Tan is more quick but efficient, where they'll be there before you even know. Like you'll be hitting the ground dead before you even realize that they were there. Very, very sneaky. And while the Iyanden fight the Necrons, the Biel-Tan fight the orcs. They see the orcs as their biggest threat. And any other sort of lesser species as well that is trying to inhabit the Eldar Maiden Worlds while the Eldari were away and other species sort of started popping up. These guys are dead set on keeping those Maiden Worlds for the Eldar. So now I guess I will talk about the paths, and hopefully then that last bit will make a little bit more sense. So the Asuryani call them the Iyethra. There are many different paths that an Eldar can choose. There's an undefined number. It's sort of just whatever you want to do, but you're following that one thing as a path. And these are sort of a role, it's typically a role within the society, and the goal is to pursue this path to perfection until mastery is reached. And then typically once you reach mastery, you just switch to another path and continue to follow that until you master it. And the purpose of the paths is to give the Eldar a purpose, something to stay occupied in order to resist the call of Slaanesh, and to give them something to work on, something that they have to, like, they can't just chill all the time because they've got work to do. And the technology still has things mostly automated, but this is more for sort of spiritual growth. But some of them are very much manual labor jobs. Now, I mentioned getting lost on the path. There is always a chance that an Eldar can become lost on his path, which is where they become obsessed with one particular path, and they just have this constant, like, almost imposter syndrome that they don't think that they have reached perfection, so they keep trying until they die, basically. Sometimes this is done on purpose, as a meditative thing, and the Farseers, the strongest of their psychers, usually are kind of, they stay on their psychic path for their entire lives, as well as their warriors, and these ones become the Autarchs. A couple of different paths include the path of the warrior. These ones, the warriors generally do become, sometimes they stay just as foot soldiers, but these ones can become the leaders, the Autarchs, later on. There are a lot of divisions of warriors as well that are sort of like the different Space Marine legions, where they all have like a different technique, they all have a different thing that they all have a different specialty. And the Eldar who kind of has mastered quite a few of those ones usually become the Autarchs once they've got a good overview of the entire, or not the entire, but all of the different sort of warrior sub-paths, if you would. There's also the Seers, of course. They're magic men, they're wizards, the warlocks, whatever you want to call it. Warlocks, there is, and then, of course, sorry, rambling, or not rambling, stuttering. Within the Seer path, there are warlocks and other such smaller titles. There is as well the Bonesingers. These specialize in manipulating the wraithbone for technology, for building, all of that jazz. There's a path version of the Remembrancers. For the Eldar, they're called the chroniclers, and their role in society is to chronicle the events of Eldar history and the present, and chronicle things. There are spirit seers. These ones are particularly gifted in maintaining the infinity circuits, as far as I can tell. There's also a grieving path where the Eldar that go down this path, they will be the main grieving person. They will take on the grief of other Eldar and mourn the dead while everyone sort of gets on with life. There's also artists. You could decide that you want to go down the path of Irish jigging, which probably doesn't exist in Warhammer, but like you can choose whatever sort of, there are big main ones that are societally important, but then you can kind of just choose whatever. Now, one of the more, I won't say popular, because it's not necessarily a fan favorite by the Eldar, of course, but the path of the outcast. So this path is sometimes chosen, sometimes not. Sometimes you are forced to become an outcast. If you can't keep with the rules, then you're getting kicked out. And yeah, so either Eldar are kicked out, or they choose that they want to leave, either because they don't like the rigidity of day-to-day life, or just because they want to go and mess around in space. All up to the individual Eldar. Now, they will typically form smaller groups because while they want to be outside of the main group, there is safety in numbers when you are gallivanting around the galaxy. So these smaller groups are called Anrath. These will typically, they'll come into groups, and then there's pirates, there are rangers and pathfinders. These guys typically will still help maybe not even their craft world, but any of the craft worlds, as being navigators, and so that's a path as well. Navigating, pathfinding, ranger, all slightly different specifications. And this is also sort of a sliding scale, as getting farther and farther away. The rangers and pathfinders are still the closest to the Craftworld Eldar in terms of relations. Pirates are a little farther than that because the Asuryani don't condone piracy. These guys often will end up being mercenaries, bounty hunters, all that jazz. But there is also an Eldar word for those who are completely lost to the craft worlds, who have completely cut themselves off, and they are independently out in the galaxy. And they call these guys the Ashir. Oh yeah, I had another note here about the Path of the Warrior. I did mention different subgroups that follow different aspects of, and they follow different aspects of Cain. That is their god of war. The leader of each group is called a Phoenix Lord. Can't remember exactly how many there were. I believe there's 10. There was another that is no longer alive, I believe, but oh, maybe there's only 8. I don't know. There's a couple of them, and they all follow different aspects of Cain. Now, past being a Phoenix Lord becomes being an Autarch, and sometimes a warrior will become lost to one shrine or one aspect of Cain in particular. These guys become exarchs and are sort of the experts of that aspect of Cain. These guys will train the newcomers, the aspect warriors, in that way of Cain. In the 41st millennium, there was a group of Autarchs that tried ruling over some lesser races once more and sort of starting up the empire again. And with that, a lot more Eldar began following the path of the warrior, which is just a cool little fact that I found. But yeah, so one other thing that I will talk about quickly in this episode is the Black Library of Chaos. Now, this technically is more so a Harlequin thing, but as I was reading, I found some notes on an Eldar that I mentioned before in one of our other episodes, and that is none other than Eldrad Ulthran. He was an Eldari Farseer who was involved in some stuff in the which was he involved in? He was involved in the heresy. I don't remember exactly what anymore, but he was on the Black Council. Apparently he's missing at the moment, but I did some reading on the Black Library because I've seen it pop up, and I know that I mentioned it in when I was talking about the Harlequins, but I thought I would just go into it quickly in this episode. The Black Library of Chaos is inside of the webway, kind of, and it is kind of like a living labyrinth library that contains not all of the current Eldar knowledge, but majority of all of the records of chaos and forbidden knowledge and forbidden powers and all that good stuff from the Eldar. Allegedly, in this library, they have the true name of the God Emperor, Emperor of Man. This is debated. I don't know exactly what, but it might be there. And then apparently they have a copy of Magnus's book and other such important tomes. It's mainly guarded by the Harlequins. That's sort of the outer ring of defense. And the patron guard of the Harlequins, Kegarak, it is said that Kegarak was the one to build this library in the first place because he is the trickster, he is the knowledge guy. But yeah, the Harlequins are sort of the outside layer of protection, and then there are the Guardian Scribes that they're sort of like hallway patrol sort of thing. And the Black Council works together with the Guardian Scribes as advisors. The White Seers is the name of the Eldar that live and work in the Black Library. They maintain the records and continue to make the new records as far as I'm aware. These guys will dress completely in white. Usually they have their heads shaved. Some of them even go as far as to wear a featureless mask. Like, these guys are entirely committed to the maintenance of this knowledge, which is a cool thing that I found out. But yeah, I believe that is all that I have for this episode this week. If there's anything that I missed or anything that didn't make sense, please feel free to let me know. I know I was kind of all over the place this time. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and next week I will be talking about the Drakari, which is the army that I play for tabletop. But yeah, I will get the end of episode, the end of show house cleaning out of the way. Again, if you're watching on the YouTube, thank you so much for being here. Feel free to drop us a like if you liked the episode. Like I said, if there's anything that you want to say or questions you've got, feel free to drop those in the comments below. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and there is that handy-dandy notification bell to remind you when our posts go out, which is every week on Tuesday. If you are listening on the Spotify, thank you so much for hanging out with us there. Feel free to give us a like and download the episode. That does really help us out. Regardless of where you are chilling with us, absolutely feel free to share us to anyone that you think would enjoy what we're talking about, or if you have any friends that you need to not initiate, but not invite, more sinister than invite. I have no idea what the word is, but any friends that you want to bring into the sphere of Warhammer, feel free to send us their way. And anywhere else that you might be interacting with our stuff, we don't have any audio posted anywhere else than those two places at the moment, but we look forward to seeing you guys anywhere else that we end up posting things in the future. And with that, I will sign off for today, and we will see you next week. Bye!